Good morning, beautiful people of the center. And take a look around you. Is there somebody you haven't met yet? Why don't you reach out and shake their hand and welcome them to the center? This morning we read an affirmation that says the unconditional love of Spirit expresses through us as kindness, respect, caring, and compassion. And at the center we teach that we are one with that unconditional love. And it expresses itself through us as those qualities. And it seems to me in our world today we seem to be struggling with that. I'm thinking of what's happening recently in Charlottesville. And also, something that Reverend Dr. David Alt posted on his Facebook page. He said, when we profess our belief in this oneness with Spirit, that's when we become a spiritual sentinel. As a spiritual sentinel, you are here to guard the light in the sense of not letting it go out. You are here to keep watch and protect kindness and offer support to those long denied it. You are to remain indefatigable in your pursuit to honor the huddled masses whose lives have been farmed as a resource, and to never circumvent your calling, to uphold the inalienable right that we are all created equal. You heard the musicians sing, "My religion is kindness," It's a statement attributed to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who said, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness." He also wrote that kindness is the starting point, the source from which flow all these other qualities such as honesty, forgiveness, patience, and generosity, the very ones we're struggling with in the world. And it got me to thinking, is there even such a thing as unkind honesty? Well, I've seen the truth wielded as an axe. I've seen that. I've seen people just saying what's on their mind, taking no responsibility for the emotional wake left behind their words. And is there even such a thing as unkind forgiveness? Or is that just holding a grudge? Is there even such a thing as unkind generosity? Well, not if I keep a little control in my generosity as my intended result. Is there even such a thing as unkind patience? Or is that just hurt? I grew up with a special needs brother, and he was slow to learn some of the ordinary things of social structure and self-care. And there were times when caring for him strained our patience to the point of no return. We weren't always perfectly patient. And through exhaustion, sometimes our kindness seemed to have been forgotten. And those times when we were short-tempered with him, they hurt him so much. Because although he was developmentally delayed, he understood that the family was challenged. And it made him sad. And I regret every time that I lost contact with my kindness then, as I do today, when I am challenged by world events to abandon my kindness. I've learned that for me, kindness is the necessary ingredient that brings out life's best meaning, and when it is absent, things go south. Last week we asked the question, what would goodness have me do? because that was our topic, ordinary goodness. And this week, our topic is ordinary kindness, and we can ask a similar question. What would kindness have me do when I'm thinking about being honest? When I'm thinking about dealing with the world, when I'm thinking about being patient or generous, or when I'm thinking about being forgiving, what would kindness guide me to do? And these questions are based on this idea from our teaching that there is a power for good in this universe and we can use it. It's a power that is everywhere present. You might say it is the nature of existence, the creative power of the universe, and I'm made of it, and I'm made from it, and so are you. And so great is the love of this power that it created me with the freedom to ignore my essential nature or to follow it. Now that's love. Perfect love is perfect freedom. And it does not impose its love upon me. It lies dormant in me, in my being, waiting for me to turn to it to receive its beautiful nudges. And when I do turn to it, the nudges that it gives me are always consistent with its true original nature, to be loving. And there are no punishments for ignoring its nudgings, just consequences. Goodness is never forced on me. Kindness always is an option, but not mandatory. So great is the love with which creation made me and you that we can ask, what would kindness have me do? And then decide whether or not we will follow it. Story time. Leslie stepped up to the cashier at the supermarket, and when the cashier tallied up her groceries, it was $12 over what she had in her purse. So she breathed deeply and started to remove items from the bags when a hand stopped her. And in that hand was a $20 bill. And she turned to the gentleman and said, "Please don't put yourself out." And he said to her, "Let me tell you a story." He said, "My mother is in the hospital around the corner with cancer, and I visit her every day with flowers. And this morning, she got so mad at me for spending all of my money on flowers, and she demanded that I start doing something else with the money. So I've been waiting here." So please accept this and think of it as flowers from my mother. There is a power for good in the universe, and I can use it. Jamie's mother and father divorced when he was very young. And he remembered that his mother fretted over a whole set of new troubles that she hadn't had before. No income but the same bills to pay. No way to afford the groceries to feed the family. Round about that time, he remembers that boxes of food and groceries started to appear outside the door every morning like clockwork for months, right up until the time when Jamie's mom could land her own job and start to afford the groceries on her own. Funny thing, they never did find out who had left the groceries. Their lives had been saved by an anonymous hero. There is a power for good in the universe, and it can use us. Mr. Stevens left the grocery store and went directly to his car, only to discover that he had locked both his keys and his cell phone in the car. And in a fit of temper, he kicked the tire and said some things nobody should say, in hearing range of a teenager on a bicycle who said, "What's wrong?" And he explained, "I'm frustrated because even if I could call my wife, she couldn't bring me the keys because this is the only car we have." The teenager handed his phone over to Mr. Stevens and said, "Call your wife and tell her I'm coming to get the keys." And Mr. Stevens said, "Wait, it's a 7-mile ride there and a 7-mile ride back." And the teenager said, "Don't worry, what's the address?" And an hour later, he returned with the keys, and Mr. Stevens offered him some money, but he refused, and like a cowboy in the movies, he rode off into the sunset without even sharing his name. There is a power for good in the universe, and strangers can use it. Dr. Muhammad Basha walked through the parking lot of the hospital, and all he could think of was that diagnosis he had just given to his patient, Jimmy. Pancreatic cancer. And it was weighing heavily on him. He walked through the parking lot looking down, and that's when he noticed an elderly man handing tools to somebody working under a stalled car. And that person under the stalled car was his patient, Jimmy. He said, "Jimmy, what are you doing?" And Jimmy scooted out, dusted himself off, got up, smiled at the doctor and said, "The cancer didn't tell me I had to stop helping people." Both Jimmy and the elderly man rode off in their cars, and the doctor said he learned a lesson that day, that kindness has no limits and no restrictions and is available to anyone to choose. There is a power for good in the universe, and anyone can use it. Nadine was driving cross country for a new job, a new start, a new adventure. It started off as a fun adventure, but soon turned into a bit of a nightmare when 2/3 of the way she realized she hadn't estimated correctly how much it was going to cost her, and she was out of money. And she still had a ways to go and no gas. And so she pulled over to the side of the road, and tears just poured out of her eyes, and through the tears she noticed an unopened farewell card on the dashboard, and she reached over and picked it up. A neighbor had shoved it into her hand, a neighbor she barely knew, as she was leaving. And she opened the envelope and pulled out the card, and a crisp $100 bill fell onto her lap. Just enough to get her through the rest of the journey. And later she contacted that neighbor and asked her why had she done that. And the neighbor said, "I was prompted. I had this feeling you might need it." There is a power for good in the universe, and neighbors can be prompted to use it. Oh, these are stories from the World Wide Web about role models of kindness. And in my book, Ordinary Goodness, I write about the importance and value of role models for kindness to guide us in our choices with their example. Some people turn to spiritual leaders for examples for how to live a decent life. Some turn to Jesus of Nazareth, who told us, he said, "Look, it's not enough to love only the people you already like. That's easy. But to love those we don't like, who are our enemies. Might not that be the supreme act of loving kindness? The more worthy act? How they're both worthy. Some turn to Buddha for a role model who told us crystal clear, hatred does not stop hatred. It has never done so. It has never worked. Rather, hatred is ceased through loving kindness. And he suggested that what is in our consciousness, our thoughts, what we nurture in our awareness translates into actions in the world. So he mentioned how important it was to maintain a calm, kind, forgiving, respectful, loving attitude towards all of life. Some turn to the Lord Rama in the Ramayana, who, when he was talking to the demon king, said, "What is the use of being rich if you won't spend your gold to help other people? Such wealth is wasted." I had my grandmother as a role model for loving kindness. I wish I had told her when she was alive how much she impacted my life. I wonder who you have. And I wonder if there's still time to tell your role models of loving kindness what their example means to you. That would be a lovely thing to do. Another one of my role models is the author Piero Ferrucci, who wrote the Power of Kindness. I learned so much from him about kindness, and he wrote about warmth as an important component in kindness. And I took his words and adapted them to kindness. So here's what I wrote about it. Don't express kindness to get it. No. Instead, express kindness because it's your nature to do so. Don't withhold kindness until you are confident it will be reciprocated. You might wait forever. Instead, express it because it is your nature to do so. And don't compare how you express kindness with how other people express kindness. There's no point in that. Rather, be authentic and be genuine and be sensitive and be sincere, and then trust your ordinary inclination to be kind. Trust it. And the way you get to trust is through practice. November 13th is World Kindness Day. And it's celebrated in many countries, many nations around the world. It's promoted by the World Kindness Movement. Some nations have public hugging events. Some make proclamations of kindness heroes. And it's a day that encourages individuals to overlook boundaries of color and race and religion and everything. No, once a year is not a bad thing. And yet, if we want to develop a mindset of kindness as a habit in this world, with everything that's going on, we may need to pay a little more attention to it than once a year. Starting small with little actions that build the momentum so that when we do face the world's trials, we have a foundation upon which to stand, and we will not be tempted to abandon what we stand for. Here are some suggestions from the World Kindness Movement from their resource page, and I added a few of my own to it. Bring a treat to school or to the office. Write a note to a colleague or a teacher, express gratitude. Be polite online. Whew. Say something nice to someone. Remember, genuine, authentic, and sensitive. Pick up garbage when you're walking down the street. Pay a little more and buy pastured eggs instead of factory-raised eggs. Volunteer at a food bank. Become an organ donor. Adopt a highway. Donate your hair. Let someone else go first. Let someone else have the bigger piece of the pie. Forgive someone. Give someone the benefit of the doubt when you're arguing. Think a kind thought about someone who you're distanced from. Say a prayer for someone who is challenging you to the core of your being. Release someone if you've been holding them prisoner in your thought. My grandmother was my role model for kindness, and I have shared this story with you, but I wanted to read it to you because, to me, it captures the topic. My grandmother bought a piano for me when I was a teen. The gift in itself was a lovely gesture, but considering my family's financial circumstances, it was a stretch of epic size. We were poor, And the people in our neighborhood typically did not have access to the luxury of a piano. To buy a piano was an extravagance that I never thought would be possible for our family. We had other more pressing needs. So when the opportunity to take piano lessons at school presented itself, I had enrolled without telling my parents, and regardless of the fact that I had no piano at home to practice on. From the start, I showed some musical talent, and my teachers encouraged me to keep studying. I took the music lessons at school, but without the piano, and so I couldn't practice between my lessons. My teacher didn't know I had no piano, and no one at home knew I was learning to play. I guess my family thought I had an active imagination when they saw me practicing on the kitchen table, as if it were a keyboard. I didn't want to burden them with the need for a piano. My youthful plan of secrecy had a major flaw, though. I did not consider that my parents would eventually receive a bill and have to pay for the lessons. Unbeknownst to me, the teacher contacted my parents and the whole thing came out. But no one told me. No one told me that my parents, in collaboration with the teacher, then made arrangements for me to continue to have the lessons without charge. I didn't know that I'd showed promise. I didn't know that my grandmother insisted that my family trust a talent that they had no evidence existed other than the testimony of a teacher who hadn't been paid. One day I came home and there was a piano in the living room. The family was gathered around it, waiting for me. Although my grandmother had furnished the lion's share of the cost from her savings, others had contributed and had gone without something so that they could help with the purchase my grandmother made. They wanted me to have an experience that none of them had had. I will not easily forget their glowing faces when I walked into the living room after school, and neither will I forget the surge of appreciation I felt when I realized what they had done. My mother said, "Well, can you play anything?" Her birthday is on November 13th. World Kindness Day. I'm just saying. When I sat down at the new piano to play, no one knew what to expect. They had no idea that I had progressed as far as I had and had learned so much without an instrument to practice on. Another scene I won't forget is the look on their faces when I flawlessly completed a piece I had been studying. I could see that my music had made every one of their sacrifices worthwhile. In the scheme of things, a piano and music lessons are small, possibly insignificant, but to me, they were everything. I was given something so much more than a musical instrument that day. I was given faith in loving kindness. And I gave my family members something too. They received the gift of knowing that their contribution, no matter the smallness of it, had given me greater access to a world of music. As significant as the gift was to me, the really meaningful contribution they had made to me came even before the piano arrived. It came in small gestures of affection, in moments of accepting my fanciful table playing, in words of affirmation, in generosity of spirit. Despite what we didn't have, and despite the hardships of coping with a disabled brother, we were giving each other the gift of faith in human kindness. Marion Wright Edelman, the first African-American woman to be admitted to the Mississippi Bar, and the founder of the Children's Defense Fund, a voice for underprivileged, minority, and disabled children, said that we must not, when we are thinking about how to make a difference in our world, we must not ignore the small daily contributions we make, which over time add up to a big contribution we often cannot predict. There is a power for good in the universe, and it expresses itself through us as our natural capacity to choose kindness. And as small as it may seem, it seems also to be essential that we do not lose touch with it in today's world, so that we can stand in our truth and speak up in support of those whose voices have not been heard. I invite you now to take a breath in with me, to let your eyes close as we turn within to contemplate that source from which we come, the creative genius, the architect of this universe. It's unconditional love flowing through us as kindness, respect, caring, and compassion. As through this prayer we remember that we have the option of being channels for that love of Spirit. And so we choose that today and abandon everything that would distract us from knowing who we are. Now, this identification with loving kindness does not weaken us in any way. Instead, it shores us up with the confidence, with the courage to meet the trials of this world, to speak, to act, and to not abandon that which brings heaven on earth. So we shake free any allegiance to violence or retribution or unforgiveness, and return instead to the source within, to trust it. There is nothing in us that is numbed by this contemplation of inner love. There is no withdrawing from the world. No. Instead, this love within causes us to shine brightly, the light to flare up in us, to communicate warmth and kindness with sensitivity, to be present, very present, awake for this world. I invite you now to take a moment with me to sit in silent contemplation.